Welcome to BookPal's AuthorConnect podcast, focused on great conversation with today's leading authors. I'm your host, Tony DiGustanzo, the president of BookPal. Today's guest is the CEO of Trust Edge Leadership Institute and a trust expert in residence at High Point University. He has advised leaders and delivered life-changing presentations on 6 continents. He is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author of The Trust Edge, The Daily Edge, and we are welcoming him today to discuss his newest book, Trusted Leader. Definitely check it out. I'm excited to be joined by our guest, David Horsager. Welcome, David.
Hey, thank you so much. Great to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah, this is an amazing book. Probably singly one of the best materials to hold in your hand. High color, high quality. Was that part of your publishing decision process?
It's all intentional. Actually, before I had a big publisher with the first book, actually, Simon Schuster, I said I had 2 little publishers, and one was a little tiny publisher. One was a New York publisher, but it wasn't one of the big ones. And they said, well, this one said, we'll do it on softcover this way. This other one said, we'll do it beautifully red, the color, the way I want it, because I pre-design before I go to a publisher. Yeah. And they said, yes. Of course, then that became all kinds of things happen. But the reason was one of our values at Trust Edge Leadership Institute is excellence, and we talk about trust. Yeah. So if you look at any of our, all of my 3 books or anything we offer out of the Institute, it has a feel that's, it's the top kind of binding, the color, the feel, very intentional.
Yeah, it's funny. I read enough business books that this one clearly jumped out. It's got, color elements throughout the entire book, highlighted, red text, made it actually enjoyable to read. It changes the experience.
And hopefully there's some decent content to go with it.
That's what gets you to turn the page. Which, speaking of content, how about you give listeners a quick overview of the book?
All my work goes back to my grad work 20 years ago when, over that, whenever it was, I started with, no one was talking about, or very few people were researching trust and leadership and this kind of thing. Now you got a lot of people talking about trust with and without research. But basically, the big finding, my first work found that this big finding was a lack of trust, the biggest cost in an organization. And it's the root cause. And then this 8-pillar framework. And I've talked about that before in my first book. We had so many new ideas that we talked about in this one. And it turns out people don't just want a 367-page book. They want this, manageable book. There's a great story up front to kind of shift our thinking about trust, this thing we know everything about, we think we know everything about, and shifts thinking, some real aspects to that whole story that have really happened, and then some fresh takeaways that we've learned in the last decade that leaders can use tomorrow. But if we go back to the heart of it, actually, probably the heart of it on this book was we wanted something to be easy to use and share.
Yep.
But we also noticed people are not solving the root issue. And this is our heartbeat now is I believe, I hope without a shred of ego, but a whole lot of research, and we put out, I think, the biggest study, a global study out of North America on trust and leadership. Trust is always the core issue. People think they have they think we got a leadership issue. In fact, they never do. The reason I follow a leader or not, actually, is trust. Yeah. We think we have a sales issue. We never do. At the core, it's something to do with trust is the reason I buy. If you want to amplify a marketing message, there's only one way to do it. You have to increase trust in the message. You want to increase learning in your kid's classroom, you have to increase trust either in the teacher, the content, or the psychological safety or trust of the room. Even the big diversity issues of our day, the biggest Harvard study shows diversity on its own tends to pit people against each other unless we increase trust. Yeah. Then we get the benefits. So this helps us shift thinking, even from what we thought about trust, like, oh, trust, that's just vulnerability or transparency. No. Some of your kids are so transparent on Facebook, I don't trust them for a second. Yeah. Because confidentiality is also trusted. So we have to think differently about trust, see it as a root issue, and then, I give the framework of how you build trust the fastest. And, there's ideas in there that, the way I lost 50 pounds in 5 months in 2011, the way people tripled sales, these outcomes of trust, you want to drive attrition down or leadership up.
Yeah. I lost my 55 pounds in 2002.
All right. Good.
So, thinking about that, I think Ethan, the character in the story part of the book, struggles with this a little bit. It certainly led to the same sort of internal struggles, which actually suggests how good a book it is when you start thinking about it a lot. Do you find that leaders, when you say, hey, all of these problems are a trust issue, that it becomes actually like this barrier for them as to like, well, I am a trustworthy person, so like, how do you sort of maybe change the definition a little bit to overcome that obstacle of, because as a person leading this company, I don't want to think of myself as untrustworthy,
Right.
That's something I work on all the time. Yeah.
Well, I think there's something really interesting here, and Ethan goes through this himself, because we can think we're trust, it's trusted in a way. So you might be a great husband, trusted father, trusted this, trusted that, and there still might be reasons you're not trusted. And so that's why, these 8 pillars of trust, originally, actually, they came out of research. So they're denoted by C words, but don't think it's some like 8 motivational list of C words, just like I came up with 8 words out of my, but there's so as an example, one of the character is important, like we've said, but we could say, why aren't they trusting me? Oh, one of the pillars is clarity. It turns out people trust the clear and they mistrust or distrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. Whenever we overcomplexify something beyond what is needed, we lose clarity, which loses trust. So you could say, well, this person's got character, but they don't have, they're not clear. So a good example of this, if you think about any type of person listening today, under this clarity pillar, and I'm just jumping to one so we have an example of seeing, because you can just pause and think, what does that mean to me, right? Yep. So a leader might not be trusted because they're not clear about the vision under the clarity pillar. A manager might not be trusted because they're not clear about expectations. A salesperson might not be trusted, not because they're not clear about how cool they are and how long they've been in business, but because they're not clear about the benefits of that product to me.
Yeah.
The teacher in the classroom might have compassion and character and all these things, but the kids, why do they hate that teacher? Turns out that teacher is unclear about the assignment, so the kids go home frustrated. And so these 8 pillars, so same with Ethan, might be trusted in a certain way, but not have what we call trusted leadership, in this fuller way.
How do you, through your consulting practices, start that journey then? I know in the back of the book, there's the 4 steps and stuff, but maybe just for listeners to kind of understand the journey to get from understand, hey, I have this problem, let's just maybe use the example of departmental conflict, so it comes up in the story through a project that's going south and one department in IT maybe doesn't align with the designers or the marketing team, and then they're pointing fingers. How does that maybe shape out in terms of a company resolving those types of issues?
I do have that 4-step process, but really we need to start earlier, and that was part of the purpose of the book, and that is we need to kind of shift thinking about this. So that's where this book is, that's a trust issue. I didn't realize, I thought that was, you'll see me sometimes argue, as an example, we never have a communication issue at the core. People, it's communication. I was a communication undergrad, right? So, but when they wake up, it's like, you're right. It's the types, because communication is happening all the time. Clear communication is trusted, unclear isn't. Compassionate communication is trusted, hateful communication isn't. Consistent is, inconsistent isn't. High character is, low character isn't. So we go against the pillars, we solve the real issue. But a couple things that can happen as far as waking up to this. One can be, when we come in and speak and train and those kind of things. Another can be assessing. If you can have a fair assessment, this is why, over the last couple of decades, we've created tools to assess trust and close gaps, and that's saved companies millions and billions of dollars. We had one company, big company, you'd all know it. They took one gap, closed it in a week, and they said it saved them millions of dollars. And so, by the way, I'm jumping around. Your author.
It's exciting stuff. No.
Right. But I love this stuff. I'm so passionate about it because I've seen the change. Because what people want, even though this Ethan goes through this journey and he realizes some things in himself. And that's really important. That's the cool thing of this, just leaders, if we pause and think, that's me, or, I can do some things about that. I had that journey myself too, the leader, but as far as when you take these 8 and solve against them, basically you're solving the real issue. I think I was going to share something else, but it'll come back to me.
Yeah, no problem. When you approach something like this through the leadership of your own organization, how do you feel, how does David do as guru of trust in executing against? Where do you find that maybe that where it is difficult?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I tell my team, I know this stuff. I believe in this stuff. I'm passionate about this stuff, and I'm totally imperfect at living it out. I tell my family the same day, and by the way, same thing. And by the way, my teenagers are really clear about that. Yep, you are imperfect at that. Hey, read your book. Hey, what about that pillar? Come on, what about that compassion pillar, Dad? About my homework or something. So yeah. So it's a journey I'm on. This jumps to both, but what I was going to say before, as far as measurement, or even some of the ways, if you see me keynote, I try to catch people in their thinking. So a couple questions I ask, like, oh, that is me, or oh, that affects me. Like, that's what I try to do with the Ethan story as well. But another way to see people care about change, first they have to see the impact of trust and what it means to them. But then the ways we assess, and I think we given away today the self-assessment for free, so you can kind of measure and look at yourself, and then there's a few simple assessments, a couple of them at the back of the Trusted Leader book that people can take a look at as well. But everything from a massive enterprise trust index at a global company or pro sports team or even a global government, down to simple self-assessments, it can just reveal sometimes we have blind spots.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we take a look through the right valid questions, then we start to see, oh, I could do something, or our team could do something, or our company could do something. And what we're always going for with trust, is actually the real goal. So we might say it's these 8 pillars that we're using to get there, but what's the real problem? We need more sales. Okay, so how are we going to use the pillars to drive sales? Well, we got a problem with attrition. The first company I used this on and became passionate about it is after my grad work, and that first book was this company was bleeding attrition. They said in 9 months they saved $2 to $4 million in attrition costs. Just a small company too. So when I see that, okay, we can lever. Trust is the lever to get this right. So I first have to have this realization in a company or a leader. It might be that a lack of trust really is my biggest cost. Trust drives influence. It drives, agile. I had a company say we want to go agile. They said it wouldn't work. Then we took a year on trust. We were able to go agile. So you can come back to how trust affects costs and time too, right? So if everybody out there thinks, well, does trust really cost me in the bottom line? Let's go simple. Let's just say I'll put a lock on something. That's a good representation of lack of trust. What's the cost?
Yeah.
Well, I got to buy the lock. That's money. The biggest cost is time. I got to open it every time I go through the gate. Or even more simple, everybody out there, think about this. Text someone you trust. How long does that take? Boop, done.
Yeah.
Now write a text to someone you don't trust. How are they going to take this? How are they going to take that? And it takes forever more. You think about anybody on your team you don't trust, you check up on, and you have churn. So they have to see that first, and that's this little epiphany of, wow, trust does affect everything. And actually, it's not that character isn't important for someone like, as an example, Ethan, but it's also, oh, there's some other things that I can do, but I see trust bigger. I see it as more complex, and I see how it affects everything. Then I see how you actually build trust. We say trust is a confident belief in a person, a product, or an organization. So when I can get that confident belief, it changes everything.
Yeah, that plays out too. And even, for our organization, we have, distribution of literally tens of thousands of titles, millions of titles really, but the ones we have on our website, and they fluctuate in price. So the publisher will say, we're going to move the price from $14.99, $15.99. And the operations team would constantly come back to me and say, like, hey, should we push this order for 300 units through? There was a price change. And, I went back to them and I said, look, I trust that you're going to make the right decision for the organization and the client. You need to make decisions. But if you subtly pull back that lens, the amount of time it took them to create documentation, to seek approval, to come back, to talk to their manager, to then elevate that up the organization for additional approvals, the inefficiencies of that lack of trust played out to thousands of dollars in labor.
It plays out everywhere, my friend. I mean, look at our government. And, I've spoken to Congress a couple of times. I don't try to admit that because obviously I'm not very good at building trust if I've done that, right? But one thing you notice, I believe, less than 80 years ago, the average bill that went through Congress was like 2.5 pages or something. And now it's over 1,200 pages. And because of a lack of trust. And the problem is, I don't trust you. I don't trust your intent. So I got to add this to that. I don't trust your intent. So I add this. And pretty soon, nobody knows what's in a bill.
Yeah.
Nobody understands it. And you have an immense lack of clarity, lack of buy-in, costs in time, and many, many other things. And we can see it every day. Same with, companies, sports teams, or whatever. So
yeah, they actually, I think the numbers need to be updated because the $3.5 trillion bill was over 2,000 pages.
Yeah, we average up.
It is a larger bill.
Right? No kidding.
So, when you first go into an organization, do you find that there's sort of consistency where people do struggle the most, the sort of low-hanging fruit that you think organizations should look at, in terms of self-reflecting? I can kind of think of some ideas at BookPal, but I mentioned one about interdepartment, operations and finance have one view of processing orders that kind of comes from the lens of profitability and execution, and sales is just wanting to close the next order. So they sometimes conflict at times. And
Sure.
So how do you sort of think about that when you go into organizations about where the most common trust issues break down?
Absolutely. Maybe what I should do is give a quick overview of the 8 pillars, because
Sure.
I think what happens is, and by the way, there's more under each of these in the book has takeaways you can use tomorrow as a leader. So
the whole back section. Yeah.
Yep. The SPA method, the 6 E's to motivating your team, all these things. But I think to hang it on, because I genuinely now, after a couple decades of this and certified folks on 6 continents and me speaking on 6 continents and doing work on 6 continents, it always comes to these 8. And it doesn't mean we don't contextualize for corruption work in East Africa with bribery issues there and how we're trying to rebuild trust compared to what's happened on the pro sports teams compared to whatever. But it always comes back to these 8. So as just a guide, these 8, I believe, are what builds trust in a leader, an organization, a brand. Number 1 is clarity. People trust the clear. They mistrust the ambiguous or, Number 2 is compassion. We tend to trust those that care beyond themselves. If I don't believe you care at all beyond yourself, even if you don't care about me, if you don't care about a mission or something beyond yourself, I'm going to have a hard time following you, being accountable to you, or trusting you. Number 3 is character. We trust those that do what's right or what's easy. Something I would say under this pillar is, we have a 7-step process for how you drive character into an organization or build character into an organization. I guess the biggest deception under this pillar is some people buy into an old psychology that's false, that you have all the character you have at 12 years old. And it doesn't mean parenting isn't critical up to 12 years old. The problem is we are every day incentivizing toward and away from higher character. You see what happened in my home state of Minnesota. I'm not there today, but big bank where they were incentivizing sales teams against the character they said they wanted to have, it cost them billions of dollars. You see what's happening in East Africa where we're working, and you see if they keep incentivizing bribery, they're going to keep having corruption that's costing their GDP every single day. So you incentivize by laughing at a joke, by allowing certain types of isms. There's a whole lot of ways we incentivize certain types of sarcasm and so forth. The next pillar is competency. I trust Tony right here because of his character and his compassion. That doesn't mean I trust Tony to give me a root canal, right? You've got to stay fresh and relevant and capable. This is why we need to, if you're selling the way you were 20 years ago or leading the way you were 10 years ago, I do not trust you. You've got to stay fresh, relevant, and capable. And the next pillar is commitment. We trust those that stay committed in the face of adversity. You think of anybody in history, that's left a legacy, Martin Luther King, Mandela, Gandhi, Jesus, or Joan of Arc. And you can think of somebody that was trusted by their people partly because of the commitment they had to maybe to death. Next pillar is connection or collaboration. And we talk a lot about how we trust people that are willing to connect and collaborate. There are counter forces to trust. And if I go into an organization, I see siloing or an unwillingness to share resources for the greater good, I know we have a breakdown in the connection pillar. And companies around the world have this problem, of course. Yeah. The next pillar is contribution. The number 1 word that came out of this research funnel, just to be clear, was results. You have to contribute results. You can't just have compassion, character, and all that. You've got to contribute results. And so that's a really critical piece. The next pillar is consistency. Sameness is trusted for good or bad. If you're late all the time, I will trust you to be late. The only way to build a reputation is consistency. The only way to build a brand is consistency. Now, as far as the book, speaking of consistency, one of the biggest bummers was we created the cover and everything in our list the way we talk about it. And if you bought one of the first 10,000 copies, you received the wrong cover, which has them out of order, which is inconsistent and unclear, but it was something that happened and I'm not going to blame anybody. It just, that's what happened. But the order, so you have this 8 posts, and it really doesn't matter the order. You can have breakdown in any of them. But what I would say about these 8 is when people start aligning with the 8 and stop saying some vague word like it's an engagement issue, a leadership issue, or a communication issue, they actually solve the real issue. Oh, that was clarity there. Oh, that was consistency there. Now, finally to your question, hopefully that gave people can hang their hat on some of these. Everyone is critical. If I was going to go from this moment right now, I would just say, put those 8 down, grab the book, and say, hey, what are we doing well? What am I doing well as a leader? Just gut check. You don't even need to buy any of our assessments or anything. Just saying, what am I doing well? Circle that. Celebrate it. You're doing some things well. None of us are perfect at any of them. But then take one and say, if I built this pillar a little bit, I think I would gain with some audience. Pick an audience. My board of directors, my leadership team, my clients. Okay, if I built that would increase trust and have an impact around here. Okay, think of that thing, and then underline that one, and then think how can I do something about that starting today or tomorrow, and start doing that.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't have to your question, if you don't have like nothing stands out perfectly, then you can always start with clarity or consistency, because there's some space that everybody has that they could be clear in this dynamic world that's full of change, or there's a consistency they could add that would increase strength in either their brand or their reputation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you think about something like integrity, it's like takes a long time to fill the bank, and then it's easy to unload the bucket, as they say. But with this, there's this variability to it where it's very dynamic and situational in nature, where you can build trust from the moment somebody walks into a room versus feeling like it's something that takes a long time to do.
So something about the misnomers of trust that should be noted right there are this, because we can think, as you said, it takes a long time to build, and yet in a moment of crisis on 9/11, complete strangers trust each other like that if they're running the same direction.
Yeah.
So there's some misnomers about, trust, that's confidence. Well, if that looks like arrogance, it's not. Trust, that's, like I said, transparency. It can be. There's some data around that from our research. And yet, there's times when confidentiality is more trusted. So we have to, we can think a little bit bigger about this, and but it really affects everything more than anything else.
Yeah, I think walking through the pillars gave this clarity, if you will, to the question I asked earlier about interdepartmental communication. Yeah. But when you think about a given organization and the 8 pillars in particular, are there profiles that fit an organization where one element typically does come in lower, or are you striving for all 10s, or how does that dynamic work across these 8 pillars?
So we do have in the Enterprise Trust Index, we're benchmarked against 30 years of Accenture data plus my grad work. I mean, we definitely see trends, and we see, universities as an example, higher on competency. When you get all these PhDs filling out, or you have, people that are higher or lower depending on different things. So yes, there are definitely profiles. There are, as an example, just jumping all over, but police officers are generally more skeptical, need more trust. But why? Well, they're lied to every day. I didn't do that. I didn't speed. I didn't steal that. I didn't. They're lied to 50,000 times a day, right? So there's different, different pieces. I think I should say this about, the research, because we're doing these massive studies every year. 2 pieces of research that might be interesting right here. One is first world countries. For the last several years, number one reason people wanted to work for an organization, ahead of more pay, ahead of a more fun work environment with a ping pong table, they wanted to trust their leadership more than anything else. Another thing that gets to your point is when we look at profiles, and this might be more interesting for leaders listening today, is about half in America, this is in the US side, about half of Americans are more apt to lead with trust, in that, in other words, they trust you until you break it. And what we found is about half of Americans lead with skepticism, the opposite of trust. In other words, you better build it from the get-go, because they're not sure until you build it over time.
Yeah.
Now, leaders out there could say, well, I trust quickly. You got my trust until you break it. And they might say, well, this group is better. They're not.
Yeah.
In fact, this group, many of them had something tragic happen to them before 18 years old. Something terrible, some abuse, something. And that's why they might lead with skepticism. The bottom line is the truth for you as a leader, doesn't matter who they are, you can actively build trust every day. Do not buy into the lie that trust is something you either have or you don't. I can't believe how many people think that. Yeah. It's not true. You can do things about it. And whether people, you have their trust until you build it or they're skeptical at first, your job is to actively build these 8 pillars of trust every single day. When you do that, you gain the greatest advantage you can have in life and in business.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it gets you, really thinking about trust from the perspective of, the way you communicate is just as important as the intent of the communication, and so those are one of those things where it then becomes less about, I was wanting to tell this person one thing and it came across another. That's a skill I need to work on versus I'm an untrustworthy person at its core.
So one quick takeaway here in our few minutes left. I mean, there's so many takeaways under these, but to that point, one that runs through my head is something I had an issue with when I was first a real leader. I was in my 20s. Almost all my staff was older than me. I wasn't from the area. I came out from the outside. I mean, I was an outsider. And I wasn't getting what I wanted from my team. And then I got absolutely clear about what I wanted. I started to get what I wanted from my team, and I learned it was my fault. And I came up with a little idea. This is one of many little ideas, but to the point about communication, it is this: ODC, not OCD. I run through ODC in my head when I ask for anything because I have challenges myself with this. O stands for outcome. What is the outcome you want? Many people just kind of, they think they give it, but what is the outcome you hope for as a leader for this project? The D is deadline, when. Many leaders do not give a deadline because they're afraid that will create conflict, when in fact not giving a deadline will ensure conflict. Even if you don't know the final, like how long this will totally take, you could say, hey, can we check on this Friday at the meeting? Instead of saying, can we check on this soon? You totally have different views of soon. And the C in ODC is clarifiers. Leave a little space for clarifying questions. Are you clear on this? Can you kind of share it back to me? Or have I been clear? Do we understand the same thing? Is there anything you need for clarity? Yeah. And this works at work. This works at home. When my daughters, they're like, okay, I said, here's the deal. I'm going to clean your room once. And I want to show you what a clean room actually looks like. Here's the outcome. And by the way, I don't want to be difficult. I just want two things. Yeah. If the bed is made and there are no clothes on the floor, we're going to call that clean. The dresser can be messed, this can be this, but we're going to see a visual. This is the outcome. Okay, deadline is every Saturday morning before we do something fun. Okay, this, are we clear on this? The concept? Yep, so because if you just run through the simple, what we've learned, I'm a farm kid from northern Minnesota. I learned if I can't use the shovel to scoop, then it's not a good shovel. So I love, when I was a professor, I like research because I want it to be based in research. Yeah, that's trust work. But when you look at the models in the back of the book, it's like, that's so simple. That's so simple. That's so simple. It's simple because we learned that's what we can use tomorrow morning to actually apply the research.
No, this is fantastic because the clarity of reading the book and having all these ideas is starting to now boil down into some actionable things that I can do within the company. As you mentioned, we are wrapping up. Love to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can connect with you. If you have there's some interest out there to connect with David, where would the best place be to do that?
Hey, come trustedge.com. Trust Edge Leadership Institute, is the institute. So just trustedge.com. You want to see my speaking and all that, David Horsager, if you can spell it, you can find your way there. But David, you can find it from Trust Edge also. Hey, would love to have any of you come to the Trusted Leader Summit. It's going to be amazing. It's in April. We'll have some just amazing guests and some great people that believe in trusted leadership and have seen the impact of it around the world. But Trust Edge is the great place, and you can get a whole lot of free tools and the research if you're interested beyond the books.
That's awesome. Yeah, and speaking about the books, if your organization would like any of David's books, you can reach out to sales@bookpal.com. Love to help you with those. Today's talk's been absolutely amazing, and I think it's a definite read for people that haven't picked it up yet.
And if they get it through you, you get the free, you get the discussion guide for your teams and all that. If you buy BookPal, you get a whole lot of resources to lead
awesome.
Discussions. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll help your organization in your department. We will be putting this out on a recording next week. So if you want to share it with teammates or colleagues, that would be great. And then our next Author Connect is on November 2nd, where my colleague Danielle Brown will be talking with Eliza Van Court about her new book, A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space. David, thank you so much. Fantastic conversation. Enjoy your speaking event later today. It was great to connect.
Thank you.
Take care.
Appreciate the partnership.
Bye-bye.